2025 seemed like it would be the year of the Richtok influencer. If you scrolled through any app for long enough, it was just a matter of time before you ran into an Hermes unboxing, a jewelry stack check, or a mansion tour video. And at the center of it all was a creator named Becca Bloom. We used to live in the same neighborhood, but more on that in just a bit. Between videos of her dog choosing between lamb shank and ribeye for dinner, or indulgent gifts from her now husband David, Becca gave her audience a never-before-seen glimpse into the life of the ultra-wealthy. And people loved it, at least at first. Becca started posting in early 2025 and in just a year gained an audience of over 7.5 million across TikTok and Instagram. But recently, Becca's usual flood of adoration has shifted into criticism and backlash, with followers now pointing out how a single piece of her jewelry costs as much as a struggling family's annual income, or how ironic it is for her to comment on inequality as the child of billionaires. So what happened to Becca Bloom? And why are we so obsessed with the ultra-rich in the first place? As someone who used to live in that world, I've been equally fascinated and terrified by our growing obsession with the super wealthy on social media. So I wanted to talk about it today. Why is it that we can't look away? Is it possible to actually rich right? And what is the cost of compulsively consuming a lifestyle we can never have? And right now, why have the tides turned on Becca? Before we get into it, this isn't a takedown video. This is just my perspective on a topic I find both fascinating and a bit dangerous, and wanted to share my perspective on as someone who lived pretty close to it for a while. So with that, let's get into it. For those who aren't aware, Becca Bloom's real name is Rebecca Ma. She's the daughter of billionaire tech moguls Simon Ma and Heidi Chow. They founded the company Camelot Information Systems, which is based in Beijing. Her family now lives in a place called Atherton, California. It's a tiny neighborhood sandwiched somewhere between San Francisco and Palo Alto. It happens to be the wealthiest zip code in the country and also how we are connected. So the backstory here is that I was in a relationship with someone who has a very similar family story and tax bracket as Becca's family. He also lived in Atherton, and we had met in college and dated after graduating. We came from totally opposite ends of the financial spectrum, which is pretty unusual if you've heard Becca's advice on how wealthy people recommend dating within their own financial bracket. But as someone who came into that world as a complete outsider and eventually became a bit disillusioned by it all, I found it wild to watch Becca Bloom's meteoric rise out of nowhere and the chokehold that Richtok had on our culture. So how did Richtok take over social media in the first place? This is obviously not a new genre of entertainment. Hollywood has been tapping into our desires to watch the rich and famous for decades. We've had reality shows dedicated to tracking their every move, hit dramas about their dysfunctional family dynamics, and movie after movie spotlighting their lifestyles. But thanks to TikTok and Instagram, we're now able to watch every little moment of their lives unfolding in real time, even the parts that would have never been shared out loud until now. This video is a perfect example of that.
Plate my cat's breakfast with me. Oscar and I are actually eating from matching chargers this morning. Sushi grade salmon sashimi. Our chef also made Oscar this tuna bone broth blend, which smells like a stinky sock, but to each their own. Soft boiled quail eggs. I'm just gonna give him one because Oscar's also a little bit overweight. I don't know if these eggs are really hard to peel or if I'm just really bad at it.
Knowing that that cat eats better than you really doesn't do anything for your own life, and yet millions of people flock to watch this type of content. That video alone has over 2.2 million views. And part of the appeal comes down to simple voyeurism. Humans are naturally curious, and we're especially drawn to things that are novel and more dramatic than our everyday life. Wealth inequality right now is greater than it's ever been, and that means that the lifestyles of the rich have been able to drift further and further away from the lifestyles of the everyday person. If you spend a day hanging around your own neighborhood, you're probably not going to see kids cruising down the street in a Rolls Royce, or just walking around casually running errands in Van Cleef or Rolex or Hermes. Billionaires have also typically spent money to maintain their privacy and hide how different their lives are from yours. But Richtok flips the script and puts it all on full display. And this gap, this novelty compared to our own lives, is what allows creators like Becca Bloom to grab our attention in the first place. But an even more subtle and insidious reason is that this type of content gives us a new benchmark to compare ourselves to. There's a theory in psychology called social comparison theory, and the idea is that we don't actually benchmark ourselves against the people who are similar to us, but to people that we see as better off. In these comparisons, we want to believe that we could also belong to that elite group, and so our brains searches for areas of overlap that could help us find common ground with them. We ask ourselves, do I like their style? What about their taste in cars? And then eventually we start to entertain the question, would I live the same way that they did if I had that kind of money too? And when the answer is yes, we decide that they're doing rich right. And that's how we start to see ourselves in them and identify with them, even though they're living a reality that couldn't be further removed from ours. As long as they don't break that mirage, we can convince ourselves that they're just like us. Becca Bloom did it better than anyone else. But is it possible to rich right? At worst, becoming a multi-billionaire is usually built on some kind of exploitation. At best, it's the result of extreme stockpiling far beyond what anyone could need. Of course, it is entirely possible to become wealthy in a way that does have a net positive impact on the world. People working to build better healthcare or reduce inequality or protect the future of our planet. It is also possible to do rich right even after you've amassed an extreme fortune. Take Chuck Feeney, who was the billionaire founder of Duty Free Shoppers Group. He believed that the best way to use wealth was to help other people, and he spent his life actively giving away his $8 billion fortune to charity and other causes. But the issue is that these things are not what our economy rewards. It's also not the type of wealth that Richtok is all about. Richtok and the success of creators like Becca Bloom, they rely on exploiting attention through desire, making money through systems that ultimately disadvantage these same people that consume their content. Multiple studies show that increased use of social media is connected with higher rates of impulse spending and lower rates of savings. Studies also show that the further off your financial desires are from your current reality, the less likely you are to take action to improve them. Richtok is a game that rewards exploitation. It flaunts consumption as a desirable personality trait, and viewers end up paying the price. And yet, despite all this, Becca Bloom was able to gather the most loyal following across the category, with fans crowning her the queen of Richtok. So why did things change so suddenly? As we talked about earlier, Richtok relies on maintaining an illusion of similarity and shared aspiration. As long as influencers can keep that mirage alive, their followers buy into the programming and ultimately are along for the ride. But Becca broke that illusion with this video.
Here's what men don't understand about equality. You think equality means splitting the bill. Women live in a society where equality has never existed in the first place. Women still only make 80% of what a man makes for the same full-time job. So when you ask for a 50-50 date, know that her 50% costs more of her income than it does yours. Second of all, women pay more just to exist in the dating world, about $400 a month just on grooming and beauty. And that's not because they want to spend more, it's because they're held to the beauty standards that men built and judged them by. So yes, my husband pays all the bills, and yes, I think that's the bare minimum.
Even though she was talking about inequality between men and women, viewers couldn't help but suddenly become aware of a second, even more glaring inequality between her and her audience. How is someone living at a level of luxury that most people will never touch lecturing us about structural disadvantage? And suddenly viewers weren't thinking about men versus women, they were thinking about her versus us. The moment she spoke about inequality, her own role as the beneficiary of another form of inequality became impossible to ignore. And that broke her entire illusion. In my opinion, a slip like this was simply a matter of time. Becca's initial reaction here was to fight back. So when a viewer suggested instead having a conversation around what her family was doing to reduce wealth inequality, she defended herself, saying, "If you knew even a fraction about me or my family, that question wouldn't have made it out of your drafts." But Becca's been taught that every decision is ultimately a business decision. My prediction is that she'll realize she needs to flip into recovery mode soon if she wants to save her audience. And she'll start leaning back into more benign, inoffensive content for a while, refocusing on things like her relationship or style, or even charity work to try to shift the focus and update the narrative. And of course, that also means staying away from commenting on inequality of any kind in the future. And I want to be clear about something. I have never met Becca, and I have nothing against her personally. But I do think that social media has done far more harm than good, and completely warped our sense of selves and what it means to live a good life. And Richtok feeds into that perhaps more than any other genre. I do think that Becca's content, especially the explainers around money and social dynamics and books, are really entertaining and possibly even helpful for the right audience. But my experience living in that world taught me this, that the lessons that Becca is sharing as someone who was born into it are just stories passed down from her parents who did the work, and not ones that were earned through her own experiences. What Becca herself may not realize is that their advice is coming from a need for self-preservation and protection of their family, and not for building from the ground up. There's a saying that I love that captures this idea so well, that what gets you out of Egypt isn't going to take you to paradise. Becca was born into paradise, and she's trying her best to stay there. The rest of us are still trying to get out of Egypt in the first place. It's a totally different game. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the situation and Richtok in general. If you enjoyed this video, I'm working on another to share some of the things that I learned from my time in that world that you also might find interesting. So make sure to subscribe. I'll link it here when it's ready, and otherwise I'll see you next time.